So how does a couple where, one is a part-time hairstylist and the other works a pretty modest government job manage to retire at 52 with fully paid off homes?
Right. It sounds almost impossible.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you consider that, according to AARP, 75% of Americans approaching retirement have less than $30,000 saved.
It's a huge disparity.
It really is. And usually, I think we assume the wealthy couple inherited money, or maybe they just stumbled onto some secret stock tip. But when you actually dig into the data, the difference between those two outcomes has, well, almost nothing to do with the size of their paychecks.
No, it really doesn't. It comes down to something much more, foundational and arguably much harder to master.
Behavioral stuff, right?
Exactly. It's entirely behavioral. I mean, we are so conditioned to think of wealth building as this cold, precise engineering problem. We think we need the perfect spreadsheet or, a master's degree in economics.
Right.
But personal finance within a relationship is it's the absolute definition of behavioral muddy waters. It is messy, it's human, and it's driven by these hidden emotional mechanics.
And that is exactly our mission for today's Deep Dives. We're looking at some really fascinating excerpts from the revised and updated edition of David Bach's book, Smart Couples Finish Rich.
It's a great one.
It is. And our goal here is to give you, the listener, a shortcut to understanding those hidden mechanics. So, we aren't going to talk about deciphering complex derivatives or trying to time the stock market.
Thankfully.
Yeah, we'll leave that to the day traders. Instead, we are exploring how you and your partner actually interact with your money, with your underlying values, and ultimately, with each other.
Which is really the missing piece for so many people. Because the greatest financial plan in the world will just completely collapse if the two people executing it are operating from entirely different psychological baselines.
So true.
And the author identifies this immediately. He confronts the single most common excuse couples use for why they aren't wealthy. It's this belief that they simply don't make enough money. He calls it the income illusion.
The income illusion. I love that term. Because when you zoom out and look at the math he presents, the entire paradigm of how we view our salaries just totally shifts.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, most of us view our income in total isolation, right? We look at a 2-week pay period, we see the number after taxes, we pay our immediate bills, and we just conclude that, well, investing is something only rich people can afford to do.
Yeah, and it's because our brains just aren't wired to process longitudinal, long-term numbers naturally. But the book forces you to do the math on your lifetime earnings, and it is eye-opening.
Oh, yeah. Walk us through that math.
Okay, so if a couple makes a combined $5,000 a month, which, is a relatively modest $60,000 a year, and they do that over a standard 40-year working life, that is $2.4 million passing through their hands.
$2.4 million. Just flowing into a household over a career.
Right.
When you look at it as a multi-million-dollar cash flow, rather than just, a biweekly paycheck, it fundamentally changes the diagnosis of the problem.
It really does.
We aren't failing to build wealth because our income bucket is too small. We're failing because we are completely oblivious to how much money is just draining out of the bottom. It's not an income problem at all, is it?
No, it's a spending problem. And to illustrate how powerful it is to recognize that cash flow, there's this brilliant story in the source material about his own grandmother, Rose Bach.
Oh, this story's amazing.
Right. So we are talking about the Great Depression. The economic environment was just devastating. She was earning just $10 a week, and her husband was earning $5 a week.
Wow.
Yeah, statistically, they had absolutely no business becoming wealthy.
But she made a conscious decision that her circumstances wouldn't dictate her outcome. I mean, they started taking just 10% of those tiny paychecks and physically putting it into a coffee can in their kitchen.
Which is such a crucial psychological move.
Yeah.
The coffee can made it tangible. It was this physical manifestation of agency in a world where they really felt powerless.
Yeah.
And after a month, Grandma Rose takes that coffee can money and just marches right into a local brokerage firm. Now, you have to remember, this is the 1930s.
Right.
A married woman coming into a financial institution alone to invest was completely scandalous.
The brokers actually told her to leave. I mean, they literally told her to come back when she had her husband with her.
Yeah, and that sexist barrier, that could have easily been the moment she gave up. It was this huge societal norm actively pushing against her financial autonomy.
But she didn't back down.
Not at all. She simply looked at them and said, "Gentlemen, if you don't want my money, I'll go next door and open an account with your competitor."
That is so bold for that era.
So bold, and she forced them to open the account. She learned the mechanics of investing, and over decades of discipline, she built $1 million portfolio.
It's incredible.
It is. She internalized the reality that you don't have to be rich to be an investor, but you absolutely have to learn to earn, and you have to start with whatever is already in your hand.
Fast forward to today, though, and we see how heavily people still lean on that income illusion. The author shares a story from one of his seminars where a guy named Jim stands up and basically challenges the entire concept.
Yeah, Jim was not having it.
Not at all. Jim says that, in the real world, he and his wife Susie are living paycheck to paycheck. They feel entirely tapped out, and they legitimately believe they don't have an extra $10 a day to save.
And you can tell it's a very genuine feeling of financial claustrophobia for them. But Bach starts asking them questions about their daily routine, trying to find where that lifetime cash flow is actually going.
Right.
So he walks them through a typical morning.
And it turns out, every single morning on the way to work, they stop at Starbucks. They order 2 grande non-fat lattes, which is about $7, plus a couple of muffins for $5. That is $12 a day, every single day, completely vaporizing before they even get to the office.
Which is the origin of what he famously coined the couple's latte factor. And it is so vital to understand that the lesson here is not about depriving yourself of caffeine or, treating coffee like a moral failing.
Sure, it's not anti-coffee.
Exactly. The latte is just a proxy for unconscious consumption. The real lesson is about understanding the aggressive mathematics of compound interest.
Which is mind-blowing when you actually map it out.
It really is, because if a couple can redirect just $10 a day, so a combined $20, into an investment account earning a 10% return, that seemingly insignificant daily habit transforms into $1 million over 27 years.
Okay, let's unpack this with a leaky bucket analogy. It reminds me of how background apps drain your phone's battery. You don't realize it's happening, you don't feel like you're using the phone heavily, but because those apps are quietly pulling power every single second, your phone is completely dead by 2 in the afternoon.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
Unmonitored spending does the exact same thing to our wealth. But let me push back a bit. If the math of compound interest is this straightforward, if just skipping the muffins makes you a millionaire, why is consumer debt approaching $1 billion? Why do couples keep tapping their phones and swiping their cards for things they barely remember buying?
Well, because the math is simple, but the environment we operate in is incredibly complex. I mean, society actively engineers zero-friction spending.
Oh, absolutely.
With Apple Pay, one-click ordering, subscription models, the actual friction of parting with your money has been entirely removed. We are culturally programmed with a buy now, pay later mentality.
Right.
But if we dig a layer deeper into the relational side, the reason couples fail to plug these spending leaks isn't a lack of basic arithmetic. It is the absence of a shared financial vision.
The vision is missing.
Exactly. When a couple has no shared destination, every single dollar spent by one partner is viewed with suspicion by the other. It becomes this constant source of friction.
Which means the obstacle preventing couples from building wealth isn't the calculator, it's the conversation.
100%.
If small daily expenses are draining a couple's future, the logical engineering brain solution would be to simply sit down at the kitchen table and fix it together. But couples avoid that table like the plague because talking about money almost universally triggers a massive fight.
Oh, yeah. It exposes an incredible amount of emotional baggage. And couples try to mask this dysfunction with what the book identifies as myth number 1, the idea that if we love each other, we won't fight about money.
I think we've all fallen for that at some point, assuming that romantic compatibility automatically translates to financial compatibility.
It is a deeply naive assumption, because how you process financial stress or how you reward yourself with purchases has absolutely nothing to do with how much you love your partner.
Right. You were raised in entirely different households.
Exactly. You absorb different anxieties about scarcity. You value the utility of money differently. And this blind spot is so pervasive that it affects everyone, including financial professionals who should, theoretically, know better.
The author actually shares an incredibly humbling story about himself to prove this, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
David Bach, a seasoned financial professional, gets back from his honeymoon with his new wife, Michelle.
Yeah.
And he decides he's going to organize their life, so he sets up a pile system for their incoming bills. He makes his pile, hers pile, and ours pile, and a to-be-discussed pile.
Which, from an engineering standpoint, sounds highly logical and perfectly organized.
On paper, sure. Until he pulls out a dry cleaning bill and realizes it costs $7 to dry clean one of Michelle's sweaters.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, he completely loses his cool. He tells her they need separate accounts immediately because he refuses to subsidize those kinds of prices.
Over a $7 sweater.
Over a sweater. Meanwhile, Michelle is totally blindsided. She operated under the assumption that since they were married, all the money would go into one joint account and they would just pay everything together as a team.
Right, they were running on unchecked assumptions rather than actual communication.
Yep.
And the immediate result was that the pile system just collapsed. Bills sat in the to-be-discussed pile because neither wanted to initiate another argument. They started paying things late fees piled up, and they spent their energy just blaming each other.
It's such a mess.
It's a perfect illustration that if a financial planner can fall into this trap over a $7 sweater, any couple is vulnerable to this kind of systemic breakdown.
But looking at that disaster, I can see why a lot of couples might conclude that the easiest fix is total separation.
Sure.
I mean, if combining things causes bitter fights over dry cleaning or morning lattes, why not just build a firewall? You keep your accounts, I keep mine, we split the mortgage down the middle, and we never have to critique each other's spending ever again.
It is an incredibly tempting workaround
Mhm.
because it temporarily stops the bleeding, right? It removes the daily friction. But keeping your financial lives entirely siloed just delays the inevitable crash.
How so?
Well, the book features this really powerful analogy from a woman in Omaha who wrote to the author. She said that after trying to get her finances in order, she felt like a supersonic jet engine going full steam ahead. But because she and her husband weren't communicating, his financial engine was going full steam in reverse.
Well, and structurally, an airplane with two massive engines thrusting in opposite directions is going to tear itself apart mid-air.
Exactly.
You might avoid the daily arguments by keeping things separate. But when a major life event hits, like a medical emergency, a job loss, or even just reaching retirement age, the structural integrity of the relationship fails.
Precisely. You have to actively plan together to get both engines aligned. But the critical misstep most couples make when they finally decide to collaborate is that they start with budgets and spreadsheets.
Which instantly feels like a restriction. Feels like you're putting yourselves on a strict diet, and diets usually fail because they rely entirely on willpower.
Yes. Willpower is a finite resource. You cannot budget your way out of a behavioral problem. Instead of starting with the math of what you cannot spend, you have to start with the psychology of why you are saving in the first place. You have to define your underlying values.
This feels like the turning point of the entire strategy for couples. Values before math.
Always.
Because if you don't define your values, you just default to what society tells you to value, which usually chasing consumer goods until you wake up in a midlife crisis.
True.
There is a fascinating moment from a seminar the author taught in Hawaii that highlights this disconnect perfectly.
Yeah.
He asked the room a really fundamental question. What is the purpose of money in your life?
And the reaction was just complete silence.
Crickets.
Yeah. When people are asked to name their core values regarding wealth, they genuinely freeze. They have never been prompted to articulate it.
But the moment he tweaked the question and asked what kind of stuff they wanted to buy with their money, the room just erupted. People were shouting out answers instantly.
Right. Everyone knows what they want to buy.
Exactly. Someone wanted a new car. Someone else wanted a boat, jewelry. One woman literally yelled out that they wanted more Viagra.
It's a funny moment, but it reveals this tragic behavioral loop. We are bombarded with thousands of marketing messages every day, conditioning us to know exactly what we want to buy. But we rarely dedicate 10 minutes to figure out who we want to be.
We confuse this stuff with a purpose.
Exactly. We constantly confuse our financial goals with our internal values.
I think people get those mixed up constantly. Like, someone might say their value is owning a boat, but a boat is just a depreciating asset you purchase. It's a goal, not a value.
Exactly the distinction the book makes. The boat is the goal. The value beneath the boat, the actual why, might be freedom or it might be uninterrupted family time on the water. At that same Hawaii seminar, a man named Tom stated that his primary goal was to play more golf. The author pushed back on him and asked, "Golf is a goal. What value does golf allow you to live by?"
And someone else actually chimed in to answer for him. A woman noted that for her and her husband, playing golf guarantees them 4 hours of quality, uninterrupted time together outside.
Oh, yep.
So the underlying value wasn't the physical golf clubs or the country club membership. The true values were health, and a strong marriage.
Once you strip away the consumer goods and identify the core values, you can actually start aligning those airplane engines. And to help couples visualize this, the book introduces the value circle exercise.
Oh, I like this exercise.
It forces each partner to independently narrow down their top 5 core values.
Let's look at the case study of Kim and Bill from the source material, because it shows how revealing this exercise really is. So they do the value circle independently. Kim determines that her top 5 values are security, career, family, health, fun, and a strong marriage. Then Bill does his circle, and his values are freedom, excitement, parents, friends, and family marriage.
And the profound breakthrough happens when a couple places these two circles side by side on the table. For Kim and Bill, seeing their values physically written out exposed the fact that their actual financial behaviors were in total rebellion against what they claimed was important.
Yeah, Kim wrote down that she deeply valued security and family. But when they looked at their reality, they had no will, and they lacked adequate life insurance.
Complete disconnect.
Exactly. Their behavior was leaving the family completely exposed. They were one unexpected accident away from total financial ruin, which was the exact opposite of security.
And looking at Bill's side, both of them valued fun, and Bill placed a high premium on excitement and spending time with friends. But their behavior dictated that they spend a massive amount of energy stressing out to save for one giant $5,000 trip to Hawaii every single year.
Oh, wow, putting all their eggs in one basket.
Exactly. They were trying to buy fun in one huge expensive chunk. But once their values were aligned on paper, they realized they didn't need the massive Hawaii trip.
Right.
They could take 3 or 4 affordable weekend camping trips throughout the year. Bill could organize a local Saturday golf game with his buddies. They could fund their actual values, friends, and excitement for a fraction of the cost, while reallocating the thousands they saved toward Kim's value of security.
But let me push back on this for a second.
Sure.
Let's say you're listening right now dealing with actual credit card debt or struggling to make rent. This whole value circle concept might sound a bit like, woo, feel-good fluff.
It can sound that way, yeah.
It sounds nice in a seminar, but how does knowing that I value freedom or family actually help me pay off a maxed-out Visa bill?
It's a crucial question because it forces us to look at the core philosophy of purpose-focused financial planning. As we discussed, willpower is finite. Arbitrary New Year's resolutions fade by February because they are just sterile rules imposed on your behavior. But human beings are incredibly resilient when it comes to protecting their core values. When you take the sterile act of paying off a Visa bill and connect it directly to your deepest value of freedom, you fundamentally alter the psychology of the action.
Because it stops being a conversation about what you are forbidding yourself from buying today. It transforms into a conversation about what you are actively buying for your future self.
Exactly. When your financial plan directly funds your deepest values, saving stops feeling like a punishment or a sacrifice. It starts feeling like empowerment. The friction disappears because you are no longer fighting yourself.
So once you have that motivation, your values are aligned, the airplane engines are thrusting in the same direction, you actually have to execute. Because you can have all the shared values in the world, but if your financial house is a chaotic mess of unopened envelopes and lost passwords, you aren't going to build wealth.
No, you definitely won't.
Which brings us to the tactical phase, the 48-hour plan and the 13 folders.
Because motivation without an organized system is just highly energized chaos. You need infrastructure to capture that motivation before it evaporates.
The sources give us this wonderfully relatable example of a couple named Bill and Nancy. They show up to a financial planner's office with a literal cardboard box full of unopened mail, random statements, and scattered paperwork.
A literal box.
Yes. And after digging through this archival nightmare, they discover that they have 8 separate IRAs scattered across different institutions, 8 retirement accounts, and they're only in their 30s.
That is the ultimate example of letting your financial life passively happen to you. I mean, they were participating in the economy, but they had absolutely no control over it. Now contrast their cardboard box methodology with Jerry and Lisa.
The government worker and the hairstylist we talked about at the very beginning. The ones who never made more than 60 grand a year, but managed to retire comfortably at 52.
Exactly. What was the mechanical difference? It wasn't that Jerry and Lisa were brilliant stock pickers. The secret was early, highly organized communication. From their first year of marriage, they sat down and created a system.
They got on the same page.
Right. They mapped out their goals together. Because they were organized, they managed to pay off a 15-year mortgage early. And because they were tracking their cash flow, they took the extra money from not having a mortgage and funneled it into a rental property. They simply engineered a plan together and stuck to it.
To help couples transition from the cardboard box method to the Jerry and Lisa method, the author provides a tactical solution: the Finish Rich file folder system. And what I find fascinating is how wonderfully low-tech it is.
It really is.
The instruction is to literally go buy a physical box of hanging folders
Mm.
and create 13 specific, tangible files.
It's remarkably grounded. You create a folder for tax returns. You make one for retirement accounts, one for investment accounts. You have one for household accounts like your mortgage, rent, or utilities.
And the most psychologically interesting one is the folder for credit cards. The system explicitly instructs you to write the word DEBT on the folder in all capital letters, DEBT.
That's intense.
It is. The reasoning is that every single time you open that filing cabinet, the word stares you in the face. It is designed to bother you.
It is a brilliant psychological mechanism. Think about how abstract digital money has become. You log into a dashboard, you see a red number, you swipe out of the app, and you instantly forget it.
Out of sight, out of mind.
It's completely frictionless. But physically writing the word debt in capital letters removes the abstraction. It forces you to tactilely confront the reality of what you owe.
But I imagine a lot of people hearing this are just, rolling their eyes. Like, we live in an era of AI dashboards, automated budget apps, and frictionless digital banking. Physically setting up 13 paper file folders sounds like we were reverting to the Stone Age. Is a paper system really necessary when we could just link our accounts to an app in 5 minutes and let an algorithm sort it out?
If you rely solely on the app, you miss the entire relational benefit of the exercise. The act of creating this physical system together is the magic. It forces what the author calls a money date.
Taking the time to sit at the kitchen table, sort through the papers, and physically build the system together.
Exactly. When you engage in that shared physical ritual, it gets everything out in the open. It actively dismantles the silent assumptions we talked about during the honeymoon story.
Right, you can't really hide anything.
No, you can't have a to-be-discussed pile when you are holding a physical piece of paper and have to decide which of the 13 folders it belongs in. Furthermore, completing a simple analog task together gives you a shared win. Small shared successes build the momentum required to tackle the bigger financial challenges.
It fundamentally transitions you from being passive consumers to active managers of your household wealth. And once that infrastructure is built, you implement the rules for a purpose-focused financial plan. One of the key rules is that your goals must be hyper-specific.
Very important. You can't write down, I want to buy a house. You have to write down, I want to buy a 5-bedroom house in Tahoe in exactly 3 years.
The brain needs a specific finish line to calculate the distance. Vague goals produce vague efforts. But the most critical mechanic in this system is rule number 4. You must take action on that specific goal within 48 hours.
The 48-hour rule. So if your hyper-specific goal is the Tahoe house, the rule doesn't mean you need to save the entire down payment by Tuesday.
No, of course not.
But you do need to go on Zillow and look at actual housing prices. You need to call a realtor. You have to take one concrete physical step to prove to your brain that this ambition is real.
Intentions have a very short half-life. When you align your values and set a goal, you get a spike of dopamine. But if you don't anchor that dopamine to a physical action within 48 hours, the motivation metabolizes into procrastination.
No, it just fades away.
The momentum dies,
Yeah.
and you fall right back into your old behavioral loops. When we pull all these threads together, the architecture of building lasting wealth completely changes. Finishing rich, as we've explored today, isn't reliant on inheriting a fortune, landing a massive tech salary, or beating the stock market.
It begins with recognizing the millions of dollars that will naturally pass through your hands over a lifetime and refusing to let it slip away unnoticed.
It requires identifying the invisible leaks, like the daily latte factor, that are draining your battery. It demands that you sit down and communicate with your partner to eliminate toxic assumptions. You have to put your values on paper so both your engines are pulling the airplane in the exact same direction.
Yes.
And finally, you have to capture that motivation by taking organized, physical action within 48 hours.
And if there's one final provocative thought I can leave you with, it's this. We spend so much time worrying about interest rates and market volatility. But if the biggest existential threat to your long-term wealth is actually the relational friction and the unspoken assumptions between you and your partner.
Which it usually is.
Right. Then perhaps the highest yield asset you could possibly invest in today isn't a mutual fund. It isn't a rental property or a high-yield savings account.
It's a conversation.
It's intentionally scheduling a 2-hour money date with your partner tonight, opening up those statements, and finally figuring out what your money is actually for.
That is an incredibly powerful reframe. You cannot solve a human relationship problem with cold spreadsheet engineering. The numbers on the page are only as effective as the communication behind them.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We encourage you to take that 48-hour challenge, grab some folders, order some takeout, and start aligning your engines today. See you next time.